Welcome to The Truth in This Art. I am your host, Rob Lee. Thanks for listening and making this podcast the best in Baltimore. Please continue to share this podcast so more people are aware of these great stories. Today, I'm in conversation with the president and CEO of Living Classrooms Foundation. Please welcome James Piper Bond. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. And I appreciate you making the time. And I want to start off with a very, very introductory question. And I've had it kind of hit or miss sometimes. I always ask, like, tell me about this. Tell me about growing up and all of that stuff. And people are like, I hate talking about myself, but they're doing an interview. So before we get too deep in it, I want to invite you in the same way. Could you share the James Bond story and how'd you get your start here in Baltimore?
Well, thanks. And I don't want to bore folks, but I did grow up in Baltimore. My family's from here, goes back, a lot of generations.
Sure.
Not that matters much, but I was fortunate to grow up in Baltimore and went off to college at University of North Carolina. And then after college, during college, I took a year, went around the country in my car with a friend and hiking and lived out west and did all sorts of stuff. And then after college, a friend and I, we'd saved up some money and we went over and bought motorcycles and went all through Europe and Northern Africa. And I was fortunate to attain a job as a P-Star, which is like a ski patrol in Switzerland for a season. And then I found a job in Corsica and learned to speak French and teach water skiing and diving. And then we shipped the motorcycles to Australia because we couldn't get through Afghanistan overland. And I spent a year going through Asia, living on $5 a day and with a backpack and riding on top of trains and experiencing as much as possible the world and going all through India and Thailand and Nepal and Sri Lanka, Indonesia, et cetera, and landed in Australia with $25 in my pocket. And I was fortunate to get a job as a head coach of Adelaide University lacrosse team. And I got to play out there a little bit. And I worked at a restaurant and wash dishes and bartend, whatever it took to keep the money coming and keep the trip, the voyage. The goal was to go around the world. Did that, and then had to went around Australia for a year, and then sold the bike and sailed across the South Pacific for about 4 or 5 months, and made our way to Hawaii, and then worked there for a while, and then came back to Baltimore. Thought I'd just stop for to see my family who I hadn't seen 4 years for a few weeks or months to make a little more money and keep going. And that's when I met these teachers from McDonough School who had this idea and were beginning to build a ship for kids called the Lady Maryland. And I started volunteering, and then I was eventually hired as the first full-time employee back in 1986 as the education director. And Chris Rosum, who then became our first captain a few months later, first full-time captain. And together we began to build that organization and grow it, all with the premise, Rob, that learning by doing, experiential learning, hands-on, being able to reach those who may not in their lives have had experiences, be out on a 104-foot schooner, or to be and to see the world out in the Chesapeake Bay, and to help build the ship, and also to be able to learn science and math and history all through hands-on learning. And so that really captivated me and kind of stemmed from that journey going around the world, where I saw people from so many different cultures and backgrounds and with challenges. And I was really inspired by this work in Baltimore. So that's how it began. And so 37 years later, I still live here, raised a family, and live in the city. And we're still at it. And there's a lot more to do. And Living Classrooms has grown a lot over the years from that one boat.
Thank you. I didn't find that boring at all. That's not boring to anyone. I love hearing about this great work, this longevity, and experiential learning, just kind of learning through doing. That's how I learned. And
Right.
kind of diving right into it. This is an example of it. Like this, doing this whole podcast thing and doing it for as long as I have, it was just kind of me being self-taught, me kind of playing with buttons and dials and figuring out how to get sound, and then kind of filling in the gaps as it comes along. But really being able to start off by getting sound was just kind of having those resources in YouTube University. But at the time,
Right.
back in 2009, that didn't exist to that degree. It was just kind of trying things. So in hearing about those travels, I think it gives me some context that that travel and kind of seeing different things and experiencing the world maybe gave you a different viewpoint of how people live and how people operate. So in coming back here, is that period in which you found like your why this sort of work is important and some of those early motivations?
Yes, Rob. Yeah, I think so. And to be able to be involved with an exciting organization from the beginning, and to help grow with an incredible group of people over the years. It's been 37 years now, and we've now have 400 staff, full and part time, $19 million a year budget, 30 different sites in Baltimore and in Washington D.C. where we have living classroom programming, whether that's a ship like the USS Constellation that was celebrated this weekend with Fleet Week, in which we helped to coordinate with the Navy and the state and the city, and it was quite successful. Or maybe it's the first charter school in the state of Maryland, one of the first charter schools, which we started 21 years ago, Crossroads School, that we manage right on our East Harbor campus. Or it's when we helped to create a program working with returning citizens, Project Serve, 25 years ago, which is a rapid attachment to work for those coming home, to be able to learn skills and earn while they learn. Again, back to that whole experiential learning by doing. I think it's such an effective way to learn. And so, yeah, that's become kind of my life's work, and I'm extraordinarily grateful to be able to do it in the city where I grew up, and we're doing everything we can to listen to the needs of the communities where we have been asked to come and help and to be engaged with. And our job is to listen to what those needs are, and to acquire resources and help provide mobility for people to access those resources, and mobility to grow and excel, whether it's learning educationally, or it's in the workforce development space, or in the community safety and health and wellness space. Those are all our core competencies at Living Classrooms.
And thank you. And I think that, being from here, being a native son, if you will, of Baltimore, it means more to see your city doing well and to provide an impact. And I think the number that I read was over 35 programs, over 25,000 youth and young adults per year getting support and opportunities to learn through Living Classrooms.
Yes, sir. I mean, that's what it's all about. We have an amazing team. Staff. We have, before the pandemic, we had about 10,000 volunteers. Excuse me. We're ramping that back up again, coming back out of the pandemic, and it's a total team effort. And we're very feel very fortunate. The city has got tremendous assets, tremendous opportunities. Excuse me. And our goal and our job is to help to understand the challenges and the opportunities, and to do our best to affect change and align with those who are seeking a better world for this city and the people that are living in it.
Yeah. So I want to shift into like just kind of like chunk about Baltimore. Actually, I got a couple questions in relation to that. Could you describe Baltimore through the lens of like innovation, education, and job skills? And how do you think we do? Like how and where can we improve, and what do we excel at? Because there's those connections there of we have a lot of talent here, but it's like, what sorts of talent do we have, and are those resources like here and things of the sort? So if you could speak a little bit on that.
Well, sure. Baltimore has amazing assets, and geographically, with the way the harbor is set up, and again, historically, that's how the city grew through its maritime connections, being on the fall line and having mills like, with the Jones Falls, and that helps to run the economy or to grow the economy. Being the one of the top ports of the world. And the port of Baltimore has been really excelling over the past few years and decade, and as a tremendous asset. There's so many things going for the city. It's close to the nation's capital. It has incredible sports teams. It has culture, history, and it has tremendous challenges that stem back to structural racism and redlining and just the poverty that exists. And so I think as someone who lives in the city and who thinks about this and works with this every day, it's we've got a long way to go, and at the same time we've got some great opportunities right before us. And so thinking about it, to your question, educationally, the school system is we're on a quest for continuous quality improvement, it seems, and that's a challenge. And coming out of a pandemic with all the learning loss and the challenges, but we still got to make sure all the air conditioners in the school work. We got to make sure that we have the facilities for our students, and we need to help those to no matter where they are on the spectrum as far as education, whether kindergarten, young, or elementary, middle, high school age, whether it's someone who may have not done well in the traditional education system, maybe it's someone who might have gotten locked up at one point, but they're coming home. Our perspective is that everyone has God-given talents and abilities, and it's anything we can do to help lift people up and provide opportunities and resources. And so Living Classrooms has been focused on that. We work with hundreds of schools providing hands-on experiential education programs, whether they're on our ships, whether at our multitude of community centers, whether it's with the Be More Athletic League, whether it's with our workforce development programs that work with Fresh Start Youth that are teenagers, whether it's with the Squeegee Collaborative, which we're engaged with, whether it's working, we provide more structured workforce programming or rapid attachment to work than any other community-based organization for those coming home from prison and returning citizens. So that's a long answer to your question, but there's a lot of work to do. And I think the city and the state, we do okay, but we're always on a quest for continuous quality improvements.
I love it. And long answers are what we like here. I mean, we like when people are thorough and like, look, this is we see it. We can acknowledge that this is what's happening while also seeing that there are a lot of different opportunities here and a lot of different resources here. Because, too often we get caught in this notion, and it kind of rubs me the wrong way as I was talking about a little bit before we got started of, people outside of here don't see what's here. They don't see the vibrancy here. They only hear about these kind of negative talk points or what have you, and that's it. And I can see that sort of impact on how people perceive themselves because of their connection to what is deemed as something negative. And I think early on having conversations with folks of, hey, let's talk about Baltimore how you're living here, arts and culture and so on. And people are like, none of that's here. I don't know about what this person. It's like, well, people are doing great stuff. And it's like,
well, they sure are. Yeah, you're right. I mean, you look like at the Equitech sector of the city and the growth going there with the tech community, the arts community in the city. There's a really growing population of folks that are growing in Station North and so forth. There's these amazing pockets of the city that are very vibrant and are alive, and a lot of people are living here because it's less expensive than DC or New York or Philly, and so we've got a lot of great people that are choosing to live in the city.
So, what would you say is one of the things that you would have in mind for your vision of a better Baltimore? Like for me, from my vantage point, I want a chicken in every pot and a beer in every hand. I don't know if that really
Right.
works, but for you, what would your vision of a better Baltimore like look like? What like one thing that comes to mind?
Well, I love your vision. That's a good one. And looking at the reality is of really disrupting the cycle of poverty is something we're very focused with at Living Classrooms, and to do that in a multi-generational approach and in a collaborative approach. And so we've been engaged in an effort on the east side of the city for the last 15 years in an area, the target investment zone area, 2.5 square miles of East Baltimore. And to be able to work with over 110 partners and to be able to look at how do we together seriously disrupt the cycle of poverty. And so to have a collaboration with our federal, state, city leaders, county leaders even as well, to bring resources. And with the federal funding from the ARPA dollars coming to the city, it's a tremendous opportunity, a generational moment to really invest in a variety of things to help improve the city long term. So I think that as we look to the future, if we can have all the wonderful things, and at the same time we've got to address some of these core issues to disrupt the cycle of poverty, and that means an improved education system. That means having resources for children, youth, and families and adults, or for folks that are living right in the city. For instance, we manage 2 early childhood centers, and I would send my 5-year-old Lucia to either of these sites. They're fabulous, but they're there embedded in public housing sites or in one of our schools to serve folks right from those communities. But that's important, and then to work with their parents who might want to be engaged in workforce programming, and to work with the grandparents who also are seeking more skill training. And so that's how Living Classrooms is jumped in. And then weave in Safe Streets, which we brought to Baltimore 15 years ago. And now that's been replicated in 10 communities to help have a creative way to look at stopping shootings and killings. And so to weave those things together in a holistic, comprehensive approach, and working together with every division of the city and the state, and to have a strong collaborative effort to disrupting the cycle of poverty. I think that's what the city really yearns for in so many of the communities. And starting, as I mentioned before, by listening to what the communities want, what are their needs. It's not what you or I think. It's what the communities want, and being responsive and in a collaborative way.
So I got 2 more real questions, and everyone, even the great James Bond gets, the rapid fire questions that I always throw out at the end. But I want to hit you with this next one. I think oftentimes we, sometimes see the tip of an iceberg, right? And there's a much larger body, a deeper issue or what have you that is there. And I think you were touching on it a bit, where there are systemic things that are here. There are years worth things that are embedded culturally here. When do you know you've gone deep enough on a topic and you're like, all right, I think we've hit bedrock? Or when do you know, what tells you to go kind of further? Like, nah, this can't quite be it. I need to get even more granular on a particular topic.
Yeah, that's a good question. And, when you think about the structural racism, you think about the red line, you think about the things that have gone on in this city for generations and generations. And we've got to peel the onion back on that. We've got to do the Jedi work. I mean, we've got a meeting tomorrow with our team at 11 tomorrow. We have a whole Jedi committee, and we've been focusing on this. And it's really important. I mean, you got to examine the issues to the point where I don't think you ever stop examining, but I think you got to go deep, and you got to go. You can't just look at the tip of the iceberg. You got to. And sometimes those are uncomfortable conversations, but we need to have them, and it's important. And so, yeah, man, that's you're right on about that. And so I think Baltimore has that, being a border state, that history. Mm-hmm. I mean, I had relatives who fought each other in the Civil War, brothers. And so it's, we're in an interesting where we live on the Mason-Dixon line and the history of this city. That during the Civil War, that they had cannons at Federal Hill aimed on the City Hall, so the mayor wouldn't do something that the federal government want. I mean, when you grow up with that kind of a legacy,
Mm-hmm.
we've got to understand it. That's why history is important. Being a history major, we've got to understand history and learn from it.
Yeah, and I like that reference to Jedi, where justice is being included in those conversations around equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I've had a few more conversations with folks, and their work is embedded in. I had one conversation recently with a person that works with an architecture firm, but their role is the head of the Jedi, like sort of efforts, and like being able to include that in there, because it can get the title could get broader, versus because there's so many different things that are there that have not been touched. And as you add in there, you're kind of leaning in and hearing from folks of this is what we need. This is what matters to us, and how everyone feels seen, everyone feels safe, and everyone feels like they're a part of an institution or city or whatever it is.
You're right on. And it's interesting, as an organization that grew, our initial programming was around environmental education, hands-on learning by providing access and broadening horizons for those who may never previously have had those opportunities. And so that's always been core to what this organization, Living Classrooms, is all about. Yeah. And just most recently, we've been getting funding to support an environmental justice approach to climate change and in the hottest areas of the city, where we're going to be planting thousands of trees, and as part of our Project Serve workforce development programming and partnering with the Tree Trust. And so that's again, it can, this topic can go in many different directions. And that's just one of the most recent aspects of our Jedi work has led us there.
Yeah. This is the last real one I got for you. What excites you most about the future of Living Classroom? So that Living Classroom Foundation, like, what are you looking forward to in the next, let's say, 6 to 10 months? Well, 6 to 12 months.
Well, it's a busy time. We just had a ribbon cutting on a new building on Pier 1 in the Inner Harbor, and we're excited about David Bramble and Peter Pinker and Adam and their company that's going to be rebuilding the Inner Harbor. So we're with our asset, we manage the historic ships down there. We have a job training program working with the Chessie Dragons and the pirate ships. We employ 30 kids. And so anyway, that's exciting that what's going to happen in an area of the city that needs help. We're thrilled about the new the Bauer Workforce Development Opportunity Center, which we're just opening as well, providing workforce training for young adults and adults who are coming from the different communities where we work, and learning in production, warehouse, distribution for jobs out at Trade Point Atlantic or in the Port of Baltimore. Or with the healthcare training we're doing with CNA, GNA training for nurses' aides. That is such an essential job in hospitals and nursing homes. And the construction training that we're doing with Jumpstart and partners, and at places like Port Covington and Penn Station and in Perkins Home. Yeah. There's a lot to be excited about it, but most importantly, coming out of the pandemic and being back at our school and seeing the teachers and the kids and the excitement, and then some people in masks, which is great, whatever. But it felt almost back to normal in the last couple of weeks. So I'm really excited about that and about the future of the city with the administration and all the vision that the mayor has, and with the new governor coming on board and aligning with the city and the state, and with how we can all work hand in hand to help provide resources and support for those in the community. I get fired up about that every day.
It's exciting work. So I think that's a good space for us to stop with the real questions. I want to throw these out there if you'll indulge me. We got just a few. Brevity is key here. Don't overthink them. And they're going to be all over the place, just so you know. What is your rule for success? Like, longevity is a thing, obviously, and I equate that to being successful. What would be that number one thing if someone's like, how do you stay at a particular project and towards a certain type of work for a long period of time?
Well, I think it's got to come from the heart, most importantly. With what any of us are doing, you got to feel it in the heart. It's got to be real. It's got to be it's got to drive anyone, and that's so. I don't know. I try each day to start with coming from the heart, and then it's all about perseverance and hard work. And I'm a strong believer in coaching instead of managing, and so to be able to put together the best team possible and be aligned to. Have goals that we set that are stretch goals, but are accomplished, and then to go out and to acquire the resources to help so that we can grow our Crossroads school from a middle school to a K through 8 and eventually a high school, so we can grow the programming in the target investment zone with an additional $20 million of effort so that we can build our new workforce development education center in DC so that we can help to care for the historic ships in the harbor, all through a lens of workforce development and equity. Service and helping people is also at the bottom of it all as well. I mean, it's got to come through that lens as well.
Here's the next one. This one is a food related one, just so you know. Since you're a local guy, crab cakes, how do you like them, broiled or fried?
Broiled. Well, yeah, broiled.
Okay. If you could watch one movie for the rest of your life, which one would it be?
Oh, geez. You know what? I was watching with my daughter Lion King the other day. I really like that one. That's the latest one.
Okay. And here's the last one I got for you. And this one has been riding a good streak recently. For you, do you rely more on book smarts or street smarts?
Street smarts.
It is undefeated. Everyone has said street smarts. I love it. So with that, I want to thank you for coming onto this podcast. And I want to invite and encourage you to really close out anything, any final thoughts, any final things you want to say, and tell the fine folks where to check out Living Classrooms Foundation, all of that good stuff. The floor is yours.
Well, Rob, thank you so much for having us aboard, and congratulations on the work you've done. As you said, you've been learning by doing. We're all still learning by doing each day, and we need things like what you're doing here to help the city move forward. I welcome anyone to come visit Living Classrooms at our sites down in Fells Point or in the harbor or up in the community, our Under Armour house up on Fayette Street. Or at Patterson Park Field, which has I think the number one St. Francis football team in the country, and practices there, and that's the site of our Patterson Park house, and just come on and check out Living Classrooms, and our website is www.livingclassrooms.org, and we'd love to get you involved, and thank you for your important support.
Well, there you have it, folks. I want to again thank James Piper Bond for coming on to the podcast. And I'm Rob Lee saying that there are great organizations in and around Baltimore. You just got to look for them.